everyone, this is Grandmaster Damian Lemos here for iChess.net. Welcome to this video. We're going to continue with our opening series. This time we are talking about the Pirc. This is part 2. If you haven't seen part 1, I strongly recommend watching it. You can find it in our channel. And this time we'll study the game Bolovic against Simagin. So let's get started. White plays d4. Usually the Pirc arises after e4, d6, and then white plays d4. In this game, white started with one d4 and black played d6 anyway. And what I like about this move order is that if white wants to play e4, then we have Pirc. And if he wants to play within d4 territory, if he plays knight f3, c4, we can always transpose to known openings with knight f6, or we can be flexible and try playing other stuff, developing our knight via e7. Of course, if white plays e4, then we are still in the Pirc defense, so we are not risking much by playing this move order. So d4, d6. Here white decided to play e4, knight f6. The main difference with the Pirc and the King's Indian defense is that white has to play knight c3 here, thus stopping himself from playing c4. In the King's Indian, we know white has a pawn on c4, and we've done a series on the King's Indian as well. I recommend it. We did King's Indian plus a King's Indian attack. So knight c3, we play this move, and white goes for a positional system. Previously, we saw f4, which is called the Austrian Attack, and it is by far the most aggressive setup for white. f4 followed by e5. Here he goes for a positional line, but okay, we'll see that even if white goes for quiet lines, we can create counterplay when we play the Pirc defense. So white plays bishop there, knight bd7. This is not the only move. I bet we can castle first. There's nothing wrong with this. We can castle, and then depending on what white plays, I can try going for e5, which is the natural move, or maybe c5. As I said, the Pirc is flexible, and in this position, for instance, if I play something like c5, I would be playing a Sicilian structure. Imagine we play c5, we take the pawn on d4, and then we have a dragon Sicilian structure. So I like this flexibility when we play the Pirc. For some reason, Simagin played knight bd7. I think it's okay. If white plays something like f4, which is unlikely, if he wants to play f4, he would have played this before. When you fianchetto, I don't think f4 is the logical follow-up, but if he does, then we can react with e5. That is one of the advantages I see from playing knight bd7. However, white, he played a positional line, so he continues with positional ideas. He plays knight e2. We castle, and now he plays f4. I don't know, if I were white, I would just castle. I castle and then I think of a middle game plan. I'm not used to starting aggressive actions unless my king is safe. With the king on e1, I don't know, maybe h3. I would play h3, trying to play bishop e3, stopping knight there, and maybe bishop e3, queen d2, and white has the choice of castling both kingside and queenside, that is a decent alternative, but if you have the choice, I mean, if you can castle, just go for it. I mean, in the opening you have to do things right. You castle, you play h3, bishop e3, and white has a good position. All the pieces are out, and then once his pieces are good, then you go for a move like f4. He plays f4 right away, and here we'll learn a concept. We saw this already during part 1, but we'll see it again. When we play the Pirc, we need to create counterplay. We know in the Pirc we don't have much space. We play from the 3rd rank backwards, so we need to play actively, and this is what black does here. He plays c5. And it is good to do this because he still has the king in the center, so if we can open that position, it is going to favor us. White plays bishop e3. If he goes for a move like d5, I already see some stuff going on for us. I mean, one day we can try a move like b5, and suddenly we have good options on the queen side, not to mention this bishop is already open. The computer says the quiet b6. But now I look at it, I find this idea as well, and then I can play b5 afterwards. So on d5, I don't think it's achieving much for white. And the same goes for taking. We can just take with the knight. We have pressure on e4. We have this diagonal as well. I mean, bishop g7 diagonal. And the c-file, I mean, we don't have much to worry about here. I feel black is a bit better because his king is still in the middle, and we have concrete plans of improving on the queen side. This rook b8 idea is something I learned from the closed Sicilian, where black plays rook b8, getting out of this diagonal, just in case, and then we go for b5, b4. Usually in Sicilian, as black, you go for queenside play, and this is no exception. So, after our last move, c5, white plays bishop e3. I mean, this is the most natural move. I mean, a lot of players would play bishop e3, and I think it has some merit. But let's see how black reacts. We take. Now he takes with the knight. This is like the obvious recapture. Taking with the queen is way too risky. I mean, the bishop is there. I can play knight g4. I already have the bishop pair in a super open position. This represents a clear advantage for black. And if he takes with the bishop, we know the bishop here is at risk. I mean, it's a clear target. A move like e5 would be opening the center immediately. So he takes with the knight. And here black finds a very good move. And now we start understanding why knight bd7 was a good move. Black plays knight b6. And let's pay attention because when we play knight b6, we are creating threats already. And that means white doesn't have 10 pieces to castle. I mean, he can castle, but if he does, then he's in trouble because we have knight c4, and then he has to play the ugly bishop c1. Apart from knight c4, this move has to be considered as well, and unless he wants to lose the bishop pair, he has to play bishop c1. Bishop d2 is not even working because this knight on d4 is hanging, so he has some issues. I mean, they are visible. He cannot castle. And apart from knight g4, knight c4 is also there, so he decides to play queen d3. Hopefully he'll castle queenside or kingside soon. But before he does that, we continue creating threats. That's key. When you want to keep the initiative, it is good to create threats all the time. Of course, we can go for a passive move like bishop d7 here, trying to play rook c8. But a move like bishop d7 gives white the time he needs to castle. If we play knight g4, castling is not a good idea. I mean, he can probably do that, but if I grab that powerful bishop, there's no counterpart to deal with bishop g7, and I bet he's losing a pawn here. That queen is overloaded, protecting the knight on d4, so he's in some trouble. The same goes if he castles queenside. I mean, just by taking the bishop, I feel I have a clear advantage. I have knight c4, I even see this move provoking this rook d2, and then knight c4 is much stronger. So after this, knight g4, white decides to play bishop d2. It is key to point out his king is still in the center. So before he castles, we fire with e5. In a couple of moves, knight b6, knight c4, and now e5, his position is collapsing and he cannot stop the opening of the center. He plays knight db5. Maybe taking is a better option. I mean, d takes e5 is now tempting, but I think this is even better because we create a threat and knight c4 is coming next. I mean, a lot of ideas. I attack the bishop, I attack the pawn. This knight on d4 is hanging as well, so yeah, this cannot be recommended. He decides to play knight db5, targeting the d6 pawn. And yes, the d6 pawn is weak, but this would really matter if we were playing a positional game. When he has the king on e1, we don't really care about the d6 pawn. We care about development and tactics. So all we have to do is open that position. And well, here we have the real mistake from white. He plays bishop takes f4. I think taking with the pawn is much better. First, he brings a side pawn to the center. If we check on h4, he still has queen g3. But most important, when he takes with the pawn, he stops this knight e5, which is a very strong move for us. He takes with the bishop, and once he plays this, I mean, even if he takes the d6 pawn, we know that doesn't really matter. I mean, we can play a move like bishop e6, trying to play bishop c4, thus stopping kingside castle, and if he castles queenside, we always have moves like knight f2 or even knight c4, and especially if we play knight c4, we have queen a5 next. Multiple threats around his king, and he's defenseless. So instead of bishop e6, which in my opinion is black's strongest move, black decided to play a6, sacrificing the d6 pawn, but we still have the concepts we said before, development and initiative. So knight takes d6, black plays knight e5. Here we understand why black sacrificed on d6. I think the right word is sacrificed. I'm not even sure. I'm sorry about that. But he made a sacrifice on d6, that's for sure. So knight e5. Now if he moves the queen, we have moves like knight c4. And, well, queen d2 is the only real move I see. Other than that, he has to take, and this is what he played. Bishop takes, and knight takes c8. White, who's under some pressure, decides to trade pieces off. And that is a good idea, because when you're defending, you like trading pieces. On the other hand, if you're attacking, you want to keep as many pieces as possible on board. So in this position, a simple move like rook takes c8 is just fine for us. I mean, if he trades, we play rook f takes d8. We have a huge development advantage, and we are likely to get our pawn back. Even a move like knight c4 looks winning, because his bishop is useless, and there's no way to protect c2, b2, the second rank, all at once. It's impossible. So rook takes c8 was a great move. Black decided to take, and we have a reason to do this. I mean, if he takes with the b-pawn, then his pawn structure is awful. That being said, white should have played b takes c3 anyway. I mean, I would say that position is kind of equal. White has an extra pawn, a weak pawn structure, but okay. He can castle. That is a huge achievement at this point. If he can castle, then later on he can try playing with his bishop. He has a game. But white here tried protecting his pawn structure by playing queen takes c3, and he still has the king there, so queen takes c3 was a huge mistake. Queen b3, knight c4. As you can see, he cannot castle queenside. If he castles kingside, we have at least knight d2, and he loses this change. So white played rook d1. At first glance, I would play queen f6, because if I play that, he cannot castle kingside, and that's all I want. I mean, keep his king in the center, but black found queen a5 check, c3. At this point, we have an easy win by playing knight e3, but I feel black missed this move. I mean, he still has rook d2, but we play rook f d8, and white is running out of moves. He cannot play his pieces, he cannot castle, so he's definitely losing this one. Instead of knight e3, black played this move, which is... it's interesting. I mean, white played queen c2 here, which is losing on the spot, but I bet he can castle. Okay, we can play a move like knight e3. This was black's idea. But okay, he can play rook d5. We have to take, let's say, pawn takes. I know, we have the extra exchange, but suddenly white has that passer on d5. He might have some counterplay. That being said, the computer says black has a clear advantage. Not a winning advantage, but a clear one. So maybe white has to forget about material and castle. I mean, he has to castle one day, right? He cannot stay with the king there. So he played queen c2, knight e3, queen c1. This is a tricky move. I mean, queen d2, it looks like the same thing, but it's even worse because we have rook f d8, and this is resignable. And, well, queen e2 loses because we take the rook on d1. So queen c1, now the big question is, what happens if we take the bishop? Then he plays king f2, and believe it or not, our knight is trapped. If we trade queens, we are helping white, and we probably have some advantage, but he's getting the knight back, and without queens, our attack is over. So we have to be extremely careful in this position. After queen c1, taking the bishop on g2 is a huge mistake. So as long as the king is there, all we have to do is open that position. White plays king e2, and then f4. We probably have other moves as well, but this is easy. He still has a lot of hanging pieces, and we open the f file as well. So pawn takes. Okay, here, careful again. We can take the bishop on g2, but he has king takes e3, so rook takes f4. Now if queen takes, we simply win the queen, we have rook f3, and if he plays king takes e3, which is what he played, we win. Well, we have a lot of winning moves, but black decided to play rook f1 check. This is funny. I mean, if he plays king d3, we have rook d8 check. We are mating him sooner or later. If king c4, queen b5 is winning. King c2, I can take first with check. And if he plays king e2, I can just take, and then I win material. So that's all for this game. I really like how black played it, and it shows the flexibility we have when we play the Pirc. It is true that white is the one choosing the setup. I mean, when we play the Pirc, it's like King's Indian. We play d6, g6, bishop c7, knight f6, we castle, knight bd7. But depending on what white plays, we have a lot of weapons. We can try Sicilian stuff, we can try King's Indian stuff. Sometimes we can try playing with c6, with knight c6. We have endless ideas, and that's why I think the Pirc is a good defense to try against e4. So that's all for this video. I hope you enjoyed this one. I hope you found this useful. And I also want to see you guys in my next chapters. Thank you.